Yeah, shout out to the track title, Push Me Fuckhead.
Welcome to MusicWeek. My name is Monty Luke, your host, and we will be reviewing the newest in electronic music releases and beyond on a weekly basis. Joining me this week, Christy Wally. She is a cultural producer and Berlin-based, all-around, multi-faceted human. Inbal Gordon, who is a Refuge Worldwide DJ and radio host. And Dom Bartkowski, who is a Humboldt University cultural sociologist. Our first album for review this week is Sandwell District and Beginnings. Let's start off with you, Krista.
Hooey. Well, first off, thanks so much for having me on the show. Happy to be here with such a great group of people. First off, Sandwell District, I know that they started as a record label and collective like around 2002. And through all the DJs who have participated, they've encapsulated a lot of old school like Birmingham sound and Los Angeles sound that has gone on to influence a lot of music that we hear in Berlin today, such as like, Oscar Ton predominantly. And a lot of the DJs involved are also Berghain residents, feature dominantly at this club. When I was listening to this Sandwell District release, I was totally on that journey with them. I was thinking, wow, this sounds like a bunch of people who have been heavily involved in this history, who are totally masters at their craft, having fun in the studio. At the same time, I felt like, at first I felt it was almost a little bit too clean for me. Like it's almost so pro that, where's the edge thing? But then, just the other day, I went to this new space in Berlin, Riet House. It's on the water. It's got a 4D, surround sound system. And you're meant to go there and go on a journey with the music and experience something. And I have to say, the whole space was so minimal and pushing wellness that it made me feel unwell. And I actually think something like this Sandwell District album is what I wish I would hear in a space like that. It's so beautifully tailored and all the sounds are so delicately placed and exactly in the right moment. And this kind of techno does bring in ideas of dystopias, and this record has, even in the track titles, themes that kind of resonate with political unrest and discomfort, I think, that we've been experiencing over the past many years. And it kind of has, the music has a point and the music has a direction. And I think that this is the kind of music to go on those deep listening journeys with. I think these people also know hi-fi sound systems very well, which also suits huge club sound systems. So I'd love to see it live. But initially I was like, yeah, it's almost like more deep listening than it is like a jacking techno record or something.
Inbal.
For me, it was also really well produced techno. I did enjoy way more the latter part of the album or the EP rather than the first part. I found the last 3 tracks way more compelling and way more interesting. My favorite tracks were Centritas Acid and then also Hidden. I really liked that there was like a little acid synth line in Hidden that made things more interesting than like the usual techno-y vibe of the rest of the EP. I thought as well that they used really well like the spacing when it comes to the mixing, a little padding for the vocal samples. Restless also had a really nice arrangement. But yeah, overall, I just felt like it was very well produced and in a good way. But I think the last 3 tracks for me were the ones that I actually connected with the music more and actually felt some kind of like energy or like some kind of a message coming through. I also saw that like the last track was called The Silent Servant. So I looked later and then I saw that they actually knew him.
Yeah.
Like I tried to actually only listen first to everything.
I think he might have been a part of the collective or something like that.
Yeah. And I actually really liked that track as well. I thought it was very emotional, and yeah, it was quite short, that one, if I'm not wrong. But yeah, I definitely liked the last 3 tracks more than the first 3.
Okay, Dom, your thoughts on the Sandwell District album and Beginnings?
Well, you just so eloquently described that, and it really overlaps with my own feelings, initial feelings. I'm not sure if I can add something, so to speak, very different or original. One maybe short characterization would be that it's immersive, meditative, mid-tempo techno that I like. I cannot listen too much to, very fast, frenetic stuff, or at least not that often anymore. And I very much enjoy exploring, this mid-tempo territory, so to speak, right? And I think the album is very consistent in this way, right? Like there's not so much variability, but it's a good thing. And this is what I mean also, that it was quite immersive and meditative. I felt like, I'm on a certain kind of journey. And I think one of you mentioned before that it somehow is like almost like a perfect music for Berghain. And I think for me, this is what Berghain originally, stood for, namely this more mid-tempo atmospheric stuff. And while I was thinking about it and listening to the album, I thought, that kind of techno is so perfect, as you said. It's so intricately crafted, like sounds are so nicely arranged and perfectly placed. It's like the art of placement, really, when you think, right? Acoustically and musically, it's so amazing that I always feel in those moments when I listen to an album like that it has always been meant to be played in cathedrals.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why also Berghain sometimes is described as a cathedral of techno or a temple of techno, right? And there's this interesting, a similarity, like elective affinity between like a cathedral and a techno club like Berghain. I think part of the reason why those spaces like Berghain have been so successful and kind of iconic is precisely because they have this like almost like awe-inspiring religious aspect to it, and that music for me is a music for that kind of space. This cathedral related experience and atmosphere.
For sure. And on top of that, I think what's cool is that they are doing it as a group, because also I think before, when some of the artists who have been engaged in Sandwell District over the years are like, Regis, Function. I don't know if the Silent Servant track is just a tribute or if he was actually a part of it, but these are artists that sometimes music production can feel like quite a solo and lonely pursuit, or it's one person in a room with like in the perfect corner of the V between their speakers, trying to listen and recreate where they're gonna, the world that they're gonna hear this music in. So the idea that a bunch of friends can get together and make this kind of art, and it seems very fluid, I think is like quite a beautiful thing.
It is, yeah, you're right.
Moving right along, album number 2, Hieroglyphic Being, dance music for bad people. Dom, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's quite a different album, even though we might place it, broadly speaking, in techno slash dance music, electronic music territory. I liked how we do have different tempos here, and I like how, unlike the Sandwell District, which is like more dubby and bass heavy, you have like a lot of high frequencies in this album. This is something that struck me. Again, how intricately and meticulously this like high frequency sound design really contributes to this variegated atmosphere of the album. So even though I have to say, in the past when I was listening to Hieroglyphic Being stuff, like it was a little bit like hit or miss for me. Sometimes I loved some tracks, and others I couldn't find my entry into them. I couldn't really, it didn't resonate with me. But this album, I have to say, somehow pulled me in. And again, like, it would be important to listen more and give multiple listens to really do justice to what's going on, because it seemed to me that there's really quite a lot going on. So it's not an album for like a quick and immediate consumption. Rather, it's something that invited me. I felt like I want to actually spend a little bit more time with the album. That was also something like I guess from my point of view, an interesting experience, because I feel like the artist invites me to their world. So this is how I felt about this album. That would be my first description.
Inbal, your thoughts?
Yeah, this was actually my favorite out of the 4 this week. When I first read the track's name, I thought it was great. Like, as a package, it was really thought out. Like, everything made sense to me. And overall, as like as a piece of art, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very, very interesting. So yeah, I recommend listening to it.
Cool. Krista?
Yeah, so I have been familiar with the name Hieroglyphic Being for quite a long time, like ambiently, but I think I'd maybe never heard a track by him. And listening to this record, even though I knew subconsciously I knew the name, I felt like I was kind of listening to a really like bold debut. It reminded me of like back in Vancouver, we have the Pender Street Steppers. One of their debut records has this track Temple Walk on it. Actually, my radio show Bubble World's named after a track, Bubble World, by the Pender Street Steppers off that same record. And it's got this, it just feels like you can hear the studio. And there's even, I think it's track 3 on this record, a reverb comes in. It sounds like the reverb of the space that he's in. And I found myself wondering if it was analog or if it was digital, and it sounds analog, but I was also like, if it was digital or he digitally manipulated it, he did such a good job of fitting that into the analog aesthetic that he's going for. Either way, it's like a total W for me. And then, I looked a little bit more into the past of his music and learned about some of his, like, history on the streets in Chicago, and almost like living in nightclubs because it was warm in there. And then also being the super smart kid who, excelled in school through this all. I just felt like it was very honest and real. But yeah, I'm like curious to go back and listen to what the other music sounded like. Cause I was like, yeah, what a great first record by this up and coming musician, which, like with all due respect, and I will go back and listen to the rest of the catalog.
Yeah, I will say, and just to add, Jamal went through the last 2-3 years, he went through a string of like releasing a ton of albums. And I would say that like that phase, and this album is included in that, all pretty much has a very similar sound to it. This is a continuation of sort of that new, sort of that current sort of like era that he's in terms of his production. What I personally know about him is that, he's mostly analog. I'm sure there's some digital stuff going on in the back end, but he's, purely like pretty much like an all analog kind of guy. But the name of the album is Dance Music for Bad People by Hieroglyphic Being, and it's out now on the Small Town Super Sound label. Our next album, Marie Davidson, City of Clowns. That is on, God, I don't remember the name of the label, but we will start with Inbal.
Yeah. So I thought that the name City of Clowns really made sense while I was listening to the actual music. It was quite interesting because for me, I was like, wow, what a high level of production. And the way they used the space really made sense for me. It's like some elements sounded far away from me, some sounded closer to me. So I was like, okay, this is very high-end, very high level of production techniques. But yeah, it has a lot of pop elements into it. It's very catchy bass line, very like cold, dark pop, maybe a bit of synth wave vibes. The first name that popped into my head was in the beginning Molly Nilsson, but she's not as, like, it's a bit different. And I think what I wrote that was like interesting tracks for me or favorite tracks as Demolition. And then I also like the YAAM Soul Wax version. I thought it really makes you dance. And I think I also heard like a little Amen break in there. I mean, yeah, you hear it all the time, but it was kind of nice. It was a little nice change up from the rest of the album. And yeah, that's what I got on this one so far.
Okay, Dom.
Yeah, very, very interesting work. Maybe what I picked on first is actually that right in the opener, the first track, you hear fragments of a pretty well-known book on surveillance capitalism. And this is actually,
You recognize that?
yes, because this is pretty well-known book, and I know, and I have this book. I read that book, right? And then I was like, I think I recognize it. This is this kind of thing, and I checked it, I have to say, and indeed, it is discussed actually that the album, this first track, but the album, the as a certain kind of overall concept, is really a kind of a social critique, if you wish. We talked a little bit about it while discussing Sandwell District, that this is also a certain kind of a coded commentary, let's say, and this is what makes it exciting. And here it's like really quite explicit, right? Like it's not a sonic metaphor. It's not a composition that kind of transmits that message, but it's like right there. It's like, the artist wears it on her sleeve, so to speak, right? And that commitment to critique of contemporary power structure, which is, fueled by, AI, surveillance mechanisms, how it impacts us, a little bit of a dystopian, quite obviously, a dystopian kind of vision. And I think also the music itself kind of exudes that, it's cold, as you said, right? It's not just in terms of genre, new wave, cold wave kind of stuff, but it is a cold sound, mechanical sound. So for me, there was this like interesting feeling of ambivalence, right? Because there's this critique of like where digitalization and AI can lead us, that actually is leading us in a pretty dystopian direction, right? But the music itself is also, very much part of that world. It sounds very like digital, cold, mechanical, on purpose for sure, right? But at the same time, there's this kind of, feeling of like irony, right? That it's this inescapable condition, right? We're in it, and we're actually using also, like, it's good and bad at the same time, right? What is good about it has also this shadow of like surveillance and lack of freedom and total control, lack of privacy, all those things that we are quite familiar with. But I think maybe we also need to be reminded of, and I think it's not so common, right? Because in electronic music that has largely and mostly, celebrated a hedonistic side of life, right? It's actually quite interesting to see someone like so consciously inviting for, that kind of reflection. So that's what stood out for me when I was listening to this album. And, like the titles as well that you mentioned, like Demolition, things like that, I kind of like that. And that's the Electro Clash aesthetic as well, So like there's this very interesting correspondence between this, kind of a verbal message and the sonic aesthetic. I found it quite interesting. And this irony, the ambivalence in it, right? Yeah.
The name of the album is City of Clowns by Marie Davidson on the D-Wee label. Krista.
Yeah, shout out to the track title, Push Me Fuckhead. Yeah, I think for me, this album is so great and so fun. Interesting.
She's Quebecois, no?
She is Quebecois. Shout out to Canada. Shout out to my homeland. Yeah, I think so. Marie Davidson a couple of years ago had her huge breakout track, Work It, which got, hugely played, remixed, was kind of across the board. And everybody loved it and I respected it. But there was something that I think prevented me from really loving it as a track, which was that it felt like her lecturing us about the state of the world. And it was like, girl, we know, like, we all know that like we're slaves under capitalism, and we all know that like, the conditions are rough. And I liked that she was talking about it directly, but because it was like the beat and then her speaking over top of it instead of her even just like singing with it, it felt like I was just listening to a lecture that I didn't ask for. Whereas with this record, she's singing her perspectives, and I think it takes much more of a like Depeche Mode personal Jesus kind of direction that I am so excited about in music, because I think for a long time we have been, and I've been more tuned into things that are like culturally coded and maybe not making a direct stance on. And like I say, Murray Davidson kind of missed it for me with Work It, but here she totally nails it. And it is like, it's fun and it's sassy and it's musical and it's Frankie Goes to Hollywood and it's like Pet Shop Boys and but in this like cold wave thing. And I think it really symbolizes two things for me. One, that music is getting really good and fun because times are hard, and also this idea that one of the futures of electronic music is in bands and band aesthetics, and that I think we're going to see a lot more producers forming bands, having backing bands, and having live shows that look a lot more like a traditional concert.
I personally hope that actually is not the case. And I do know where you are riffing on that from. I know Sean Ronaldo just recently, was it Sean Ronaldo in his newsletter?
I think he said something about Avalon Emerson's band. I'm not saying necessarily it's a hope, but I think it's a direction that's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Personally, I don't want to, just because I am in this sense, I'm very much a purist about the aesthetic and the paradigm of dance music and what it's supposed to be about. It's not supposed to be about us standing in front of some fucking stage with some people fucking playing down to us. You know what I'm saying? And I totally see what's happening in terms of that, and I agree. It's definitely something that we're seeing more and more. I don't like it.
It's more fun to fail as a group.
That's true, though. Yeah.
But also, I think we're seeing more musicians who are vocalists who participate in underground electronic music going in the band direction. Though, like, I don't think that even the Sandwell District with Regis and Function and everybody. I also kind of see that almost as like, it's not band, but it's collective. Even remember the big one a couple of years ago in the mainstream was like Fortet, Skrillex, and Floating Points, right? It's like, I think bands, supergroups, collectives, like, and I totally hear where you're coming from, and that's a good reflection that electronic music is its own thing, and it's not meant to be consumed in the way that bands have been traditionally consumed. But I think there's something about group dynamics that are coming to the forefront.
Yeah,
that's for sure. I mean, like, think about this formula, right? Fairly common in electronic music, that you have like just one person standing there, focused, immersed in the process of generating all those sounds, right? I think you're absolutely right about the group dynamic. When you see people interacting, I think that's very, very important point. It seems to me that there's a certain kind of magic to that group dynamic when you see people together on stage, right, interacting between themselves and with the audience.
It's cool when I go see a band, but like when I go see a band, it's what I'm expecting. But when it comes to dance music, I feel like it should just, me being a weirdo purist, being around for so long, I don't like it for dance music.
I don't think it's a weirdo being a purist about wanting to like protect the original like aesthetics and intention of being a music producer. So cool. you raise good points, Martin. Hey, don't sell yourself short.
I mean, I think it's also what attracted me to this kind of music, because I actually came from a background of a guitar player. Like, I used to sing and play songs, and sometimes with other people. And I think for me it was quite what I wanted. I wanted to step away and just be in an environment where it's all about the music, not so much about being on stage. And for me, it allowed some kind of like also meditational vibe going on for me as a person while I play a set or whatever. And I still think you connect with the people. It's just in a different way. It's more like in a spiritual way rather than look at me, I can do this with my guitar or whatever.
Yeah.
Except that, you know, electronic music culture also, you know, became very much about worshipping personalities. Let's
Yeah,
face
but
it.
that's not
You know,
fun.
right? So I'm with you, because this is also like what originally attracted me to it, right? And you know, when I was like a teenager, I couldn't even, you know, witness most of those guys doing their live shows or DJ shows. Honestly, I knew it from records, from, you know, cassette tapes and mixtapes, things like that. And maybe that, you know, preserved some sort of mystery about those artists, right? But what we see now, you know, 3 decades later, is like it's totally a cult of personality. You know, like when there's a party, everybody faces the DJ booth, right? And I know there's quite a few DJs who say like, don't look at me, like don't pray to me, right? Just have fun, like lose yourself in music, because people rarely do actually. This is the truth, right? And this is what I meant also, that maybe this tried and tested and also very interesting classic formula is to a certain extent exhausted, you know, and it's very hard to find something else. And I think maybe that's why people try to bring, you know, import the band formula from another genre, because they feel like this can dynamize, you know, the performance, because let's face it, it is about performance, right? I wish it was just about music.
I know.
Right? But it isn't, and we all know it, and we have to face it, that it's rarely just about music.
The name of the album is City of Clowns by Marie Davidson on the Dewey label. Next up, our last album for this week, Marshall Allen, New Dawn. And we'll start with Krista.
This one is just wow. You know, this artist is releasing his debut record at 100 years old. And I think I lack the jazz vocabulary to even like express how important this record is. But listening to it is just like a journey through time and space. I actually didn't even realize that he was the band leader of Sun Ra's orchestra before listening, which was really cool because there's some cosmic sounds on the first and last track that are that classic kind of theremin-esque sci-fi futurist, Afrofuturist sound, but the music is so laid back. I was like, wow, I feel like I usually hear music like this that's a little bit more, you know, pushing something forward, as opposed to hear something that's just so calm and just like, I don't want to say grounded, because all of this music, going back to Sun Ra's orchestra, is incredibly grounded, but it's like cool, calm, and collected kind of vibes. And then it goes into, like, again, lacking some of the jazz vocab. I want to say there's a track that's a bit like bebop, or goes to really not like not the kind of jazz that we're used to hearing in a notable release in this day and age. So yeah, when I found out that this amazing person is 100 years old doing this, I just thought, how lucky are we to be able to hear something like this? And it reminded me a bit of like when Quincy Jones died recently, and I went back into his back catalog and saw all of the eras of music and all of the people that he was connected to in one lifetime, and how amazing that is. I mean, when you know, yeah, he had like friends born in the late 1800s, you know, and then going up to producing for Michael Jackson and everything. So I think this is almost like an even headsier version of that, more psychedelic version of that kind of legacy. And it's just, yeah, it's profound.
Inbal.
I absolutely love the prologue. I thought it was beautiful. The whole album as a jazz album is pretty much like a masterpiece. Great mixing. I like the vocals on New Dawn. It was quite a surprise to have a little vocalist there. And I thought that Sony Dance was really cool because it was really stripped down and slowly all the elements build up on top of it So the arrangement there was really interesting, and it kind of keeps your ears peeled. I don't know if you can say that about ears, but I just did, so I guess you can. And I thought that Angel and Demons at Play had a fantastic bass line. And overall, as an album, like as a jazz album, it was great.
Dom.
Yeah, fantastic album. I have to say that I love that kind of sound, and I was immediately reminded of, Miles Davis albums from the late 60s and Lonnie Liston Smith's Cosmic Echoes sound from the 70s. So that was, simply quite wonderful to be immersed again in that kind of sound. Very life-affirming, soothing, and calm. In a way, to go back to Mary Davidson's album and a social critique kind of coded in the album, I think that this is like a perfect antidote, to this like dystopian aspect of contemporary surveillance capitalism and this everything that goes with it, right? That's the kind of vibe, a kind of sound that is an antidote to these darker forces that, as you said, we actually know quite well, all too well, right? To the point that we are even, I'm completely with you, irritated when we are kind of lectured sometimes about those things, right? Like, come on, of course, we know we don't need to be reminded of it. Rather, we should maybe do something about it. And I feel like Marshall Allen does something about it, right? Mm-hmm. Without just like telling us, but inviting us into a kind of a sonic atmosphere that is like really so beautiful. Raising cosmic consciousness, I'm tempted to say.
I think you can say it in this case.
Right. And as you said, profound. That's a very good word. Quite sublime, really. And makes you feel good. But not in a shallow way of just being relaxed, but in a more profound way that I can't even find good words to describe right now. But the feeling is there, and this is what this album means to me. Like it has more to it, and it invites multiple listens, I think.
To me, it felt like a sunrise. I don't know if it's the name New Dawn, but while I was listening to it, it felt like a shred of hope. Like there's the next day kind of a thing.
Absolutely. I thought that, the having the second track is New Dawn, right? Having this as a so to speak, a mood setter. Was great, and then you go through the album and there's Angels and Demons that I think is like absolutely amazing track as well, right? And so for me that's definitely perhaps the favorite out of four, but it also nicely corresponds with Sandwell District's cathedral like cosmic vibe, but in a different genre. And I think although it's clearly identifiable as a jazz album, it also goes a little bit beyond, right? Like it really expands the borders of the genre, even though of course it's not like completely original in a sense that Lonnie Liston Smith, for example, or Miles Davis and many others did that kind of thing before, but it's just so nice to have it, a new incarnation of that sound right now. So I love it. It's a great piece of work.
I'm going to really bust up this love fest over this album and say that I was actually disappointed by this record. I think that the expectation, personally, I completely am aware of Marshall Allen and his history and his connection to the Sun Ra Orchestra. And maybe that's why I was a little bit disappointed about how traditional this album is. In terms of its sound, in terms of, to me, it felt like this is an album of compositions that, have been sitting around for a while. Mm-hmm. I think that, like, yes, he's 100 years old, and maybe it's asking a bit much to be, for this guy to be groundbreaking, but I really felt like, even within the sort of rubric of jazz, that this felt very safe. And I was expecting more.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to hear like the DMT release swan song from the mind of a genius?
I wanted to hear. I was expecting more cosmic. I mean,
Okay.
the name of this album suggests something new, something to look forward to, something, forward-looking. And I wasn't getting that. I was just getting not even contemporary jazz. It almost feels like, and my jazz sort of vocabulary is also very limited, I will admit, but it really felt like it felt retro.
I think you're right, but at the same time, it makes me think about what you said about feeling it's like a sunrise, right? And there's a new day, and in a sense, it's the day like the others. There's an eternal return of the same, right? It's a cycle rather than a unilinear progression where we expect constantly something new. Right, but it's like an affirmation of the fact that no, like we are more in the life cycle. We are in repetition of the same, which is slightly different but identifiable as the same, right? And the sunrise, I think, is an interesting metaphor for that. Sunrise is always the same in a sense, right? But we welcome it. So I'm with you. I think I know what you mean, because when I heard this album, I didn't think that there's anything new in it. Like I was immediately reminded of Miles Davis, who was doing this stuff 60 years ago, right? Lonnie Liston Smith 50 years ago, and many others after them. But I approached this as a new sunrise, which means something that I know, but something that also makes me feel like I'm in contact with something good and important in this sense, right?
I think it felt like not anything like super fresh, like everybody says, but it did feel like something is blooming, or like we said, like a sunrise.
Yeah.
Like it was nothing groundbreaking whatsoever, but just, things were like slightly stripped down, and then the elements were building up, and the arrangement and things like that, or like slight changes, slightly things that in the jazz world you do, but not necessarily in that way. So I did feel it was slightly a bit different than other jazz records I've listened to. But it was just like very well produced and just tasted good. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like a nice meal.
Exactly.
Like it's not like a Michelin restaurant, but it's a pretty good restaurant that you'll go again.
I can understand some of the disappointment from your side, though. I think being like the only Black person in this conversation right now, like your relationship to Afrofuturism would also be different than like mine, for example. And I think of people like DJ Stingray, who I've spoken to and has talked about people mimicking electro rather than pushing the ideals of electro forward. Like this was supposed to be music about technological advancement and where things could go. And, this artist carrying like the past, present, and future of Afrofuturism like on his shoulders, in a sense, I could understand the build-up of anticipation, and then to get something that's just really beautiful and nice is kind of like, what the hell, man?
The name of the album is New Dawn by Marshall Allen. It is out now on the Weekend label. Thank you very much for joining me this week for Music Week, Dom, Inbal, and Krista. We'll see you next week with 4 more albums and more weird stuff to say.
Bye.
Thank you for having us.